Illinois' Child Welfare Agency remains understaffed. At least one Bloomington family didn't hear back for a month.
I can't imagine how terrifying it would be if you're a responsible investigator to have that kind of work burden.
That story is coming up on WGLT's Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, carbon capture technology captures the attention of the insurance industry. Could some be left uninsured?
I was like, you are kidding me. That was like somebody dropped a bomb in my lap.
And an ISU geologist leads a search for rare earth elements to help fuel green technology right here in the U.S.
Is there going to be enough? Who knows? There's nothing now, and they're working really hard. We're working really hard to find something.
Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patient Paul Brandt.
So I just went without them for all those years. I talked to somebody who had recently gotten hearing aids and talked about the fact that they were connected to the TV. And so that kind of prompted me to try it again.
Paul's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. I'm John Norton. Illinois' Child Welfare Agency is understaffed, and that's putting staff and children at risk. That's according to an attorney who says the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services has not met federal guidelines that were spelled out to reform the agency. That shortage became evident in one case involving a Bloomington family. 5 children were not checked upon for months after the agency was told about a case of neglect. WGLT course reporter Edith Brady-Lunny joins us to give us all the details. Edith, thanks for joining us in studio.
Good to be here.
Well, let's start with you recently talked with a source who previously worked as an investigator for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, and that was in the Bloomington office. And if I have this right, she told you she had 71 cases on her caseload when she left the agency. That's accurate?
That's true.
Okay. What were the implications she described for that heavy workload?
She talked about the stress level that she experienced as an investigator, both mentally and physically, as she tried to juggle that many cases. The issue goes beyond what cases are on an investigator's plate, really, because they have to figure out how to get to the new cases that are also laid on their desks every week. She said she watched her coworkers struggle to manage that stress, and some were even hospitalized and also left state employment.
Well, before we got going here this morning, you were talking or telling me about an attorney with the ACLU, I think it was, about the limits that have been imposed now on the number of new cases that can be assigned. What are those limits and why?
Well, there was a consent decree in a lawsuit between DCFS and a class of minors represented by the ACLU, and the state agreed to limit the number of new cases to 12 most of the year and 15 new cases during the peak time for hotline calls. And this was put in place to help investigators in the field get to the children who may be the target of abuse and neglect in a timely manner. And the DCFS office in Bloomington also handles Livingston and DeWitt counties. And that's a lot of travel time for investigators to cover in order to get to those families.
Well, you said there was a recent Bloomington case that you highlighted as an example of alleged neglect that may not have been handled in a timely manner, at least according to your source. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure. Jessica Bloomberg is charged with child endangerment in McLean County for allegedly leaving her 5 young children, and those kids are ages 1 to 9, home alone without food. When the Bloomington police were called in November, they found the kids alone with little to no food in the apartment, and the apartment was largely unfurnished. So the former investigator said DCFS records showed the family was also the subject of a call in September. But another investigator, presumably because of her large caseload, was unable to follow up. And these are the types of cases that keep DCF workers awake at night and lead to the criticism of the agency.
Did you have a chance to talk with DCFS about these staff shortages?
Yes, a spokesman for DCFS said the agency has the highest staffing levels currently that it's seen in the last 15 years. And this is due in large part to a serious recruiting effort by the state and pay increases made possible by a boost to the DCFS budget. And according to the state's data, 2 vacancies currently exist for investigators in the Bloomington office. The spokesman also maintains that DCFS is able to locate 96% of the children within 7 days, and investigators have initiated their work within 24 hours in 99.7% of the cases last year. But I will note that starting an investigation just means that you make what's called a good faith attempt to reach the family after a hotline call.
There has been a new DCFS director. Any optimism about, rectifying these deficiencies?
Well, people like Heidi Dallenberg, and she's the attorney with the ACLU, are hopeful that Heidi Miller will make improvements in the areas that have been cited over and over again in annual reports by the Inspector General and the ACLU. So more updates on how the agency is doing will be coming in the next couple of months. So we'll see if things are moving in the right direction.
Edith, thank you for this report again and for joining us here on WGLT Sound Ideas.
Happy to do it.
Edith Brady-Lunny is a correspondent for WGLT. She is also our courts reporter. You can read more of this story at WGLT.org. Bloomington has a new hockey team coming to help fill its downtown arena, a venue that's been mostly dormant for the last several years. Will the hockey team help reverse years of financial losses for the city-owned venue? And what else does the city plan to bring to the arena? Listen tomorrow on Sound Ideas.
Palestinian journalists have become Gaza's window to the world, documenting the destruction, the killings, despite the danger. 22-year-old Plesty Al-Akad is one of them.
I don't want the world to see us as numbers only. No, I want them to know us, to know how we're feeling.
Al-Akad talks about her reporting and the future she wants to see. Tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Wake up with Morning Edition tomorrow morning on 89.1 WGLT.
This is Sound Ideas, WGLT's news magazine. I'm John Norton. In the industry of clean energy and biofuels and agriculture, carbon capture and storage is a hot topic. But it's not just those production-oriented industries that have their eye on the growing practice. The insurance industry is taking an interest as well, as WGLT's Lindsay Jones reports.
The technical term is carbon sequestration. That's the process of capturing CO2 gases, usually those emitted by large industrial operations, and taking them and storing them deep underground so they don't enter the atmosphere. And right now, carbon capture storage plans in McLean County are a no-go. That's after a county board vote in December in which board members denied a request for a special use permit that would have allowed a Gibson City-based company to place 3 carbon sequestration wells in rural McLean County.
18 noes, 1 abstain. The motion fails.
But before that vote on December 14th, the county's Zoning Board of Appeals heard hours and hours of testimony from the permit applicant, One Earth Energy, as well as various experts and environmental advocates, largely affiliated with Bloomington-based justice group Illinois People's Action. This is Executive Director Don Carlson.
The incomplete emergency response plan filed by One Earth clearly endangers the health and safety of the public, and their special use permit has to be denied based on that.
The ZBA also heard from members of the public who would live near a well, including John Miners, who told the ZBA he was offered a contract for a well, but declined it.
That hurt a little bit, I'm going to tell you. So why did we basically not sign this? Because of the liability issues.
Risks associated with carbon capture technology largely center on the potential leakage of CO2, which can cause CO2 poisoning and oxygen deprivation. And Miners wasn't the only person with liability concerns. Sally Lacer also shared concerns about liability with the ZBA, concerns that were unique to her and her 160-acre property outside the McLean County line. Lacer said she too was offered a chance to contract with One Earth Energy and allow a well to be placed on her property.
I spoke with my insurance company recently. My agent spoke with an underwriter that based upon the information available at this time, I would become ineligible for any insurance coverage on my farm, home, and buildings at this location.
Lacer also told board members the bad news didn't stop there for her, but continued all the way to the bank.
Next, this brings me to lending opportunities. I spoke with the Gibson City Bank, which informed me that I would not have lending opportunities with them without being insured. This is staggering, isn't it?
Lacer's testimony was unique, partly because the farmland she owns that could have held a CO2 well is a certified organic, conservation-oriented farm with thousands of trees on the property. The farm isn't as production-oriented as others that could house CO2 wells. And as ZBA member Julia Turner noted, of all public comment against CO2 wells in McLean County, of which there were many, there was only one regarding insurance.
And we had one person bring that up, and we had many people who lived in that area, are familiar, have been in the middle of this decision for quite a while, and we had exactly one person with nothing to back that up.
The ZBA debated whether to bring in an expert witness to testify about insurance, but ultimately decided to proceed with a vote on whether to recommend One Earth Energy's permit. Although the full county board denied it, the ZBA voted to recommend approval. So what was with that insurance risk that Sally Lacer shared, and how common of an issue could that be? Lacer shared the letter with WGLT, which came from an agent affiliated with American Family Insurance. It was short, but said that an underwriting team determined it would not insure the property based on the information it currently had available.
So I was like, you are kidding me. Like, that was like somebody dropped a bomb in my lap.
The company does not comment on individual policy issues. But in the larger insurance world, carbon sequestration efforts are catching the eye of multinational commercial markets that can afford to take on risks associated with carbon transport and storage, which developers are increasingly interested in due to financial incentives. Everett Hansen is an associate vice president and client executive with Marsh, a global insurance broker and risk advisor.
Demand for carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects is being fueled primarily, like many other clean energy initiatives, by the wave of investment that's been spurred by the Inflation Reduction Act. And in this space, while many of the associated risks are not new, some are, and in most cases, these risks are likely to be best managed with insurance.
Earlier this week, another global insurance company, this one based in London, launched what it called a first-of-its-kind insurance facility dedicated specifically to carbon capture storage. It's a direct response to the growing carbon capture industry, and the policies are being shaped by the developers seeking the coverage for potential projects. Hansen, of New York City-based Marsh, says the commercial insurance industry, as it continues growth related to CO2 storage, is playing a critical role in the possible projects. CO2 wells, for instance, have to receive a permit from the federal EPA. And part of getting that permit includes an applicant demonstrating they have the financial wherewithal to handle any problems that may arise.
And the EPA actually allows insurance to be used as one of the means of financial assurance demonstration. And many developers are looking to insurance as the most efficient or low-cost means of fulfilling the necessary capital requirements that they have to demonstrate in order to obtain the necessary permits.
Although CO2 storage facilities are not yet operational at scale in the U.S., Hansen says the companies that can provide this kind of protection draw their risk assessment information from, quote, analogous industries, like the natural gas industry, as an example. Hansen cannot and did not speak on whether the growth of CO2-related insurance among multinational firms will broaden to include insurers like the one that Sally Lacer has for her Gibson City farm. But as the market catches up to the status of other industries, Hansen says,
I think it's certainly a possibility. Recent
projections from a group called Vantage Markets Research say the global carbon capture industry is projected to reach a value of $7.5 billion by 2030. I'm Lindsay Jones.
One McLean County board member said they voted against One Earth Energy carbon sequestration project because it didn't have enough safety protections in place, but noted the company could reapply later. Stories and conversations around Bloomington, Normal, and McLean County. This is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. An Illinois State University geologist is at the forefront of the search for rare earths and other materials needed to support modern society. The U.S. has historically relied on other countries for things like rare earths and lithium, but Dave Malone says they are in this country if you know where to look. And that's where he comes in. In this conversation with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker, Malone says there is a rapidly escalating national need.
For all of green technology, from windmills to electric cars, batteries, magnets, things like that require some specialized
speakers,
things.
Screens,
everything.
A whole bunch.
More than you can think about it. And if we want to talk about lithium first, historically, lithium was mined from rocks called pegmatite. So these are associated with granites. So in the Black Hills, we visit as part of field camp. There are old lithium mines that we visit and talk about the lithium occurrence. There's been hard rock lithium mines. There's some that are existing in our country still here and there, but most of the lithium production is overseas. And for that matter, a lot of this other green technology commodities are overseas too. So, we'd call these strategic minerals as well. So that's the federal government sometimes calls these strategic minerals.
So the perception has been that the U.S. doesn't have a lot of this laying around. Is that not correct?
Well, it depends on what grade we're talking about. So if we want to go back to ore deposits 101, first of all, you have to be able to get at something. Is it cheap enough to be able to get at? So it comes down to economy. So if we were paying, for example, copper, there's a lot more $10 a pound copper around than there is $2 copper. Right, so it all depends on what the extraction costs are and what the commodity prices are, whether it's economic to be able to extract. And there's also the environmental concerns, like certain states like Wisconsin prefer not to have any sort of mining whatsoever done. Minnesota, if you have the boundary waters, who'd want to see a copper mine in a place like that? So in places like Nevada or Arizona, where historical mines operate, they still operate. Some of these mines are more than 100 years old, so we're getting lower grade but big volume to make the economics worth. I don't want to get too far off of lithium because lithium's kind of interesting, and I've been sideways involved with this for about 15 years. So the way I first got interested in modern lithium is a lot of times they're doing it as part of brines. So when you drill a water well, we want to drink fresh water, but if you go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, the water gets a little bit saltier, and in some of those salts you have dissolved lithium. It kind of goes in with the sodiums and chlorines and seawater. So sometimes your really salty waters that you might find deeper in the ground happen to bear lithium, especially as a byproduct of extracting petroleum. There's a lot of salt water that comes up with that. And historically, that salt water has been pumped back underground just to keep the reservoir pressures up. But people are thinking now, well, we're taking it out of the ground anyway. Can we scour a little bit of lithium out of it along the way to get some commodity from stuff that we wouldn't have thought about previously?
Is that now becoming more cost effective to do?
Yes, it is. The idea is if we're taking the petroleum, if you look at an oil well in southern Illinois, 99% of that's salt water and 1% of it's oil, but they keep it circulating and they can keep that, small 1% production going essentially indefinitely. So, there's not a lot of oil coming out of the well. So that's the first place we're looking for some of these commodities. Old mine spoil, so places where we mined before that have already been disturbed, can we go in there and look? Or is there something that we're already doing that we can maybe take a lithium all along the way?
So is the U.S. going to be able to get an adequate supply of these things given the ramp up in need?
I think that it's going to take some time, but the federal government is really investing heavily in strategic minerals. And the way they're doing that is through grants to the state geological surveys. So there's been millions and millions of dollars put into exploring for strategic minerals. And that's things like your rare earths, your cobalt, your lithium, the things that we need. And I think this is part of Build Back Better in some way. So some of that $2 trillion investment package that went through Congress a couple years ago is filtering down to exploration. So to get those grants, and I'm kind of affiliated with 2 or 3 of the states and helping do some of the basic research associated with these. Is there going to be enough? Who knows? There's nothing now, and they're working really hard. We're working really hard to find something. So there was one historic rare earth mine. It's on the boundary between California and Nevada that was put out of business because Chinese could do it cheaper. But since it's a strategic issue, they're trying to bring that one back online, and there's another one in the Bear Lodge Mountains, which is part of the Black Hills. It's really close to breaking ground and coming online too, but there's really nothing. So something's going to be better than nothing, but that's a different question. Let's say we can wave our magic wand and make all electric vehicles tomorrow. We would not have anywhere near, we'd only have a fraction of the commodities that we would need to be able to actually do that.
So which states are you involved with?
Well, I work with the Illinois State Geological Survey out of Urbana, and they're looking in several different places. One is the ash from combustion of coal for rare earths. So, there's lots of fly ash pits next to power plants that might happen to be, for whatever reasons, enriched in some of the things that are useful. That's the first place you'd look, right? Stuff that's already disturbed. Some person's trash is another person's treasure. The one I'm more involved with, we're looking at limestones that are rich in phosphorus that were deposited in oceans in Illinois and adjacent states 400 or so million years ago. And the seawater chemistry at the time was able to deposit phosphorus, and phosphorus behaves chemically like some of these things that we're interested in. So if there's phosphorus there as a byproduct, there's these rare earth elements that are associated with it. In Wyoming, I've worked with the Wyoming Geological Survey too. They're looking for rare earths associated with weathering. So, rare earths are only rare because they're not concentrated. You can go to anywhere and do a chemical analysis and find some of them in the ground, but are they concentrated enough? Did Mother Nature help us along the way and concentrate those, make a little bit more?
So how does weathering concentrate?
Well, let's say we have a granite, okay, and we expose the granite to the air. Part of it will oxidize, that's rotting. Anything with iron in it will be able to oxidize. And anything with feldspar in it will turn to clay. So that water reacts with the granite, the oxygen in the atmosphere reacts to granite, and that kind of dissolves away, reacts away some of the things that we're not interested in. So we're able to concentrate through weathering. The minerals that hold the rare earths happen to be really durable in a weathering environment, so they're in the sand that was left behind from that weathering event.
You mentioned coal ash, you mentioned oil wells, the weathering of granite. It sounds like you really have to be creative about where to look.
Right, you do. And the easiest place to look is where somebody else has found it, right? But then once you run out of things like that, you do have to be creative. And I tell my students that all mineral prospects or energy prospects are originally found in your mind. So you have to think and think how Mother Nature can do these things.
That's ISU Distinguished Professor of Geology Dave Malone. From his research, he says, other people will better know where to look for materials the nation must have to move into a green energy future. Dave Malone spoke with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker. And thanks for choosing WGLT's Sound Ideas, made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help today from WGLT's Lindsay Jones and Charlie Schlenker, and from correspondent Edith Brady-Lunny. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.